Good morning to you all. It's Monday the 17th of November 2025 and we're assembled here for the Staffordshire Police Fire and Crime Panel. Sorry for a few minutes delay. The meeting is being webcast live and will be archived for 12 months, and it can be viewed on a link that's on the website. If I may continue to the agenda, and Mandy, apologies that we have.
We've received apologies from Councillors Williams, Lothran and Councillor Khan.
Thank you very much. Item 2, declarations of interest. I always say at this point, if there is anything that does come to mind as the meeting is progressing, please indicate. So 3, we have the minutes of the panel meeting and confirmation hearing, both held on the 22nd of September 2025. Are there any points to raise from those minutes? Councillor Atkins, I think. Yep.
I wanted to raise when the Commissioner will feel it's ready to come back to us with a report on stalking, in particular around dedicated officers and embedding the Jane Monckton Smith's homicide timeline. Because the last time when I raised the number of issues on stalking, you come back with a written response, but we think we need more of a detailed response on the police's response to stalking, given its implications for murder further down the line. And I believe that you are doing so. At the time I raised stalking, you said it was very timely and that you were doing work on stalking. But what I'd like to see is a far more comprehensive response on stalking, and so we can have that on the work programme, and that you were going to bring back a report telling us exactly what you were going to be doing as a force on this issue.
Thank you, Councillor Atkins. Yes, it's absolute priority piece of work for us at the moment. I've just seen an early draft, but quite detailed, of the business plan for my team's investment in a support service for victims of stalking and harassment. I think when we can put that back to you, we will, as soon as possible actually. The sensitivity there is around some of the procurement obligations we have to meet, because we will be going out to tender. But I think in terms of the brief, we're probably at a point within a few weeks to let you have a look at the detail. I wouldn't want to speak about the force's response necessarily. It's not a given that there'll be specialist officers. There are already officers who are very much engaged in this type of activity. But I wouldn't necessarily say that it was a specialist task. That might be a question that we can pull out, or I will attempt to pull out on Thursday when I speak to the Acting Chief Constable in my public performance meeting. So you might want to engage with that, and I will seek to come back with some reassurance for the panel on how the service respond to stalking and harassment as well.
That back in September, you were saying that Staffordshire was looking at whether there should be dedicated stalking officers who would work as subject matter experts. That was under consideration back in September. Has that now been rejected, or is that an ongoing discussion?
Apologies, Councillor Atkins. I don't recall stating that. Where did you pick that up from?
That was in the November 2024 stalking action plan. That we said by September 2025. Yeah. The police had pledged to consider whether Staffordshire should have dedicated stalking officers as subject matter experts.
Okay.
That was back in the November 2024 action plan.
Okay, I'll be happy to double check the situation there. It's an operational matter, but I'll see what the detail is and what they're thinking about the necessity for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And are you content with that? Yeah. Thanks, Councillor Atkins. Can I just then, as the minutes, sign those as a true reflection of both meetings, if I may? I'll get in the nods and so forth, so I will sign those accordingly. Thank you very much for that. Before we just go into item 4, may I invite the Commissioner to just make a brief statement with regards to the news of last week on the future of the Office of Police, Fire and Crime. Commissioners. So, Commissioner, please, your statement.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, Chairman. Morning, everybody. It's not every week you get abolished, so it was an interesting time. Certainly not every week you get told that something of that significance is going to happen, and it's going to be announced an hour later than you're told, which I didn't appreciate. I didn't think that gave my colleagues and I around the country enough time to properly brief our teams prior to the announcement being made public. Disappointing. Just to summarise, the government is not going to continue with the next election for Police, Fire and Crime Commissioners across the country. So this term will run out in May 28, and then there will be a move in places which have strategic mayors to a mayoralty, where they will appoint a deputy mayor, possibly for both roles, possibly one deputy mayor overseeing both. We've got deputy mayors running under mayoralties in, I think, 6 areas of the country already. It's a successful model, I think, lacking that direct accountability that you get with the elected representative being sort of passed on through the mayor. I know that's not led to the visibility of or accountability for police in particular in London, where people don't seem to appreciate that the mayor is the police and crime commissioner. He certainly doesn't behave as he is. But in other parts of the country, that's worked reasonably well. I'd already prepared my team, and we were working towards potentially passing on to a mayor in 3-4 years' time. And we were working the organisation into a position where it would be so lean and effective that a mayor would be able to concentrate on their economic tasks. I think the thing that's concerned me about the proposals is there's likely to be an interim in the majority of areas that won't have mayors, which will mean a police, crime and potentially a fire board made up of the top tier authority leaders. Now, whether that will be 2, 3, 4 authorities in Staffordshire, I'm not so sure by then, and some independents, and they will appoint someone along the lines of a deputy mayor, so a similarly paid person to take 24-hour, 7-day-a-week attention to the 2 services, which is a reasonable thing, but I'm not comfortable with the blurring of accountability across multiple council leaders. If you've read the press releases from Home Office and the letter that's been written to the local authorities, you'll see there's very little... I was just astonished at how dismissive the letters were of the previous model of police and fire authorities. It said, don't worry folks, we're not going back there again to that bureaucratic model. I thought, I wonder what the other 37 places in the country which still have fire authorities running on that basis will feel about that. My understanding is actually they're looking to move the fire authorities into those new boards as well. So to add to the weight of challenge that you all have as local government councillors and representatives, you will now have leaders who will be taking responsibility for community safety, setting up a new board to do that, and potentially in the bulk of the country, bringing fire and rescue under that banner too. There's real challenges there, by the way, because government has yet to clarify the position on operational independence for fire, and in that case also to determine the employer, because for fire I remain the employer at the moment, although that needs dealing with. I guess the only other concern for me, Chair, is that in those places that are going to have the boards, that will mean two transitions. One to a board, and then possibly 2 years later on to the mayor. That doesn't seem like good, effective, efficient business to me. That feels like an opportunity for distraction and an opportunity for not a lot to get done. So I am somewhat concerned that the pace of the last few years will not be repeated in the beyond 2028 for a while. But in the meantime, just some reassurance for yourselves if you need it, but certainly for the public and the businesses of Staffordshire, I'm not going anywhere for 2.5 years. As far as I'm concerned, this is a full-time operation, and I'll be keeping my oversight of the two services, watching the budget, making necessary investments, and keeping the place as safe as I possibly can. Chair, the only final comment from me is, of course, it's not just the end of Police and Crime Commissioners, it'll be the end of the Police, Fire and Crime panel. So we're both sailing in the same boat for 2.5 years more, but we'll look forward to that.
Thank you very much for that statement, Commissioner, and I think as the months and years unfold, we'll know our future, exactly how it's going to work. But I do thank you for that. Very important that we understand the implications as well as the ideas behind it. It's yeah, thank you for that. So may I go on to item 4, which is the questions to the PFCC from members of the public. We have 2 questions from Mr. Stock relating to an update on the actions following the Supreme Court ruling and the meaning of sex in the Equality Act. And these are part of the agenda pack available on the website. So we take those questions as read. Commissioner.
Chairman, ordinarily I'd be comfortable with that, although I think, as you're aware in your review of the panel, I'd be more comfortable if we discussed questions in the public forum, because not everybody takes the trouble to read the agenda online. But I'm particularly keen just to clarify one of the questions from Mr. Stock, which is around strip searching, because not only because he and I have had a number of exchanges of correspondence over the last few years, but I think this is in the public interest. So the National Police Chiefs Council have now moved, I think appropriately, to reflect the change in the Supreme Court as a result of the Supreme Court ruling. Essentially, whilst there was a little bit of confusion and different forces had different approaches, it appears Staffordshire, along with the rest of the country now, have determined that a transgender officer will search in line with biological sex and cannot search someone who's not of the same biological sex, even if that person agrees. I think that is the clarity that Mr. Stock has been seeking, because that's close to the Supreme Court finding. And I'm very hopeful that not only does it avoid some confusion with those people being searched, but also confusion from the officer's perspective. I've been a little uncomfortable for some time that whilst there was very careful discretion, senior officer oversight of this, it wasn't necessarily clear to the individual officers what their role was. I would just say, by the way, sometimes people are searched very much in their own interest because there might be a safety risk. They might have something hidden upon them, drugs, etc., that could cause them harm. I believe if that is the case, the service will still make an appropriate decision to search if it's in the interests of that individual's health, which is quite appropriate. So I hope that helps just clarify any further confusion, because my answer on the website, I'm afraid, doesn't go into enough detail for my liking, but I hope that covers that.
Thank you, Commissioner, for that clarity. I think it's quite helpful to see how we are answering those questions, that the public are clear and understanding. So thank you for that. We have a question from Mr. Bradbury. 2 questions. Mr. Bradbury, you are present. Do you wish to raise any supplementary? Yeah. And obviously, as you're taking your seat there, Mr. Bradbury, they must be questions relating to the question that was raised and in the Commissioner's response. Are you okay with that, Mr. Bradbury?
Sorry, I'll start again. Over the time, I've put forward many questions and you never get onto the minutes.
Mr. Bradbury, I don't. Your question must be relating to the questions that you've asked as a supplementary. If there is not a supplementary, then I thank you for your presence.
I will have to be reminded of the questions that I've put forward, because I do not know at this time.
The ones that I gave you this morning earlier today.
Can I just invite
that was the answers. I don't know what the questions were.
panel secretary to just clarify?
Thank you, Chair. The 2 questions from Mr. Bradbury. 1, why is the Staffordshire Police Force allowed to withhold the names of officers who have been found guilty of criminal offences and also given the option to resign or be sacked? Question 2, when officers are allowed to resign, do they still get their pension?
Ah, yeah. Yeah. In most places, when you get sacked, you get sacked. But I don't understand that if an individual is such a threat to the community, why they pick and choose what names are released. Surely everybody should know who those perpetrators are.
Mr. Bradbury, I'm not too sure. I think that's an opinion rather than a question. And unless there is a question, I'd like to move on.
If I may, Councillor Atkins, you mentioned earlier about the stalking bit. At the last meeting on the 22nd
Mr. Bradbury, your question is to the Commissioner,
Yes.
not the panel members.
Yeah, but she made the point.
Could you put your question, a supplementary question, to the Commissioner if there is a question? If not, I'd like to move on to the next item of the agenda.
Mr. Commissioner, then, why was I stalked on the 22nd of September this year?
Morning, Mr. Bradbury. I don't know, sir. That sounds like an operational matter, and I'm not going to discuss an individual case or incident. I'm not aware of that. If you want to write to me, I will look into it for you and ask the police the question. Do you have a supplementary, sir, related to these 2 very good questions about officers being disciplined or whether they lose their pension when they resign? I've made quite a comprehensive...
I don't understand if people who are such a threat to the community are
Mr.
not being having
Mr.
their
Bradbury,
names put
can I
out.
close this section here?
Yeah.
There is clearly no supplementary question with regards to the questions and the answers that are given on our agenda. And if that is, it's not an open questioning session. This is very much a chance to raise a supplementary question to the answer that you have been given.
Yes.
And we'd like to proceed, please, if that's with respect.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm going to, I'm now going to close this section of it, please, Mr. Bradbury. Moving on to agenda item 5, decisions, and if I can invite Mandy to make comment.
Thank you, Chair. There are 2 decisions, I think, on that the Commissioner has made since the last meeting, both of which are on the agenda with an electronic link for members' information if they want to ask questions on those.
Thank you very much. Members, are there questions to the decisions that were made that are online? Commissioner, if you'd like to comment.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. I think the decisions are self-explanatory. I've made an investment in 4 pieces of equipment, pump rescue ladders. What isn't in the decision note, which I think was a pity, is the value of those. But I think, David, you were aware of that, is that right? Oh, do you mind if David Greensmith just updates us on the value of those for a bit more detail?
Yes, please, David.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. So in terms of the total capital value for that, the reason obviously the decision note, because it was over £1 million. The exact figure I can't remember. It's about £1.1 million for the 4 appliances broadly.
Thank you. No indications on that, so those are noted. So moving on to agenda item 6, we have the MTFS police update. Commissioner, would you like to introduce your report?
The panel, I'm very grateful to the panel for endorsing my recruitment of Sarah as S151 officer at your last meeting. So she's delighted to be here to introduce this paper to you. I'm going to leave it to Sarah to just take you through the detail. We're in this is a Q2 update, give you a sense of where we are with the budgets to actuals and then what that means going forward. It's very likely I'll pop a chip in at the end, if I may, Chair.
Thank you. So welcome, Sarah. This is your first MTFS meeting. So over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, and good morning to panel members. I'd like to take you through some of the key points within the updated medium-term financial strategy report. The report includes an update on the MTFS position for 25-26 based on Q2, which is up to the end of September financial position. It reviews the year-end forecast for 25-26 and looks at the budget setting assumptions made to date as we move forward through the budget setting process. Setting the budget and the MTFS continues to be challenging, and the panel are asked to note the continued high level of financial uncertainty as detailed in paragraph 1.6 of the report. These areas include clarity around the expectations in relation to the neighbourhood policing guarantee for 26-27, above budget pay awards which are placing additional strain on the force, and the comprehensive spending review funding figures. It's assumed that there will be a precept increase, although the exact increase is not yet known. The table in paragraph 2.2 outlines the budget timetable for 26-27, and both the Force and the Commissioner's Office are already well underway in the budget setting process. So if we firstly take a look at the current year's budget, The budget position for Q2, as I said, which takes us up to the end of September, the forecast is in line with the budget, resulting in a small positive variance of around £785,000 for the end of the year. The detailed revenue position, as at Q2, is set out in Appendix 1 of the report. As at Q2, the revised capital programme is £32.45 million and includes planned spend across information technology, transport, estates and equipment. The outlined capital programme for each area is shown in Appendix 2 of the report, and it should be noted that the capital programme is currently under review as part of the medium-term financial strategy update and the budget setting process. Moving on to the medium-term financial strategy assumptions, which have been subject to scrutiny and review, they remain broadly in line with what was previously reported, with the exception of pay awards. The starting position for the savings challenge of 10.9 million represents circa 4% of the overall budget. However, in previous years, there are a number of constraints placed on where the savings can be found, and these constraints include the number of police officers being ring-fenced nationally and the fees and charges also being set nationally. Both the Commissioner and Staffordshire Police have been reviewing planned revenue savings, pressures, proposed investments and capital spend. This work has identified a number of high-level revenue budget changes which can be seen in paragraph 4.1 of the report. I'd like to draw your attention to the pay award for September 2025. This has now been agreed and is higher than the uplift originally budgeted for, which will have in turn an impact on future years moving forward. The agreed pay award for 25-26 was 4.2% compared to the budgeted uplift of 2.8%, so that's added a further pressure of £3.5 million. The Home Office has provided £120 million of one-off funding, of which £1.8 million has been allocated to Staffordshire. It's assumed that there will be no further funding for this above the budgeted pay award, and therefore the pressure is going to be absorbed locally. Paragraph 4.2 shows the forecast movement in the MTFS position since it was set in February of this year, to reflect the changes highlighted in the previous paragraph 4.1. The changes reflected in the MTFS are shown on table 4.2, and increases to the gap are now 16.9 million up to 28-29. The position reported also assumes a precept increase of 2.99% in 26-27, which equates to £8.60 increase on a Band D property. This was the assumption made in the approved MTFS in February 2025. A sensitivity analysis has been completed and is shown in paragraph 4.25 in order to highlight the impact of any changes to the medium-term financial strategy. And in relation to funding of the additional pressures, the Force has a comprehensive efficiency plan, and alongside the resource allocation challenge panels, this has now identified £4.8 million worth of savings. This leaves a further £4.8 million to be identified to close the gap for 26-27. The 25-26 MTFS had assumed the use of a budget support reserve in the years 25-26 to 26-27. However, this has now been reversed in the figures presented in the report. It's important to note that whilst we are using the budget support reserve that remains available to use over the life of the MTFS, the usage of this reserve needs to be balanced against factors including smoothing out any incremental savings and allowing for targeted one-off investments. In relation to funding assumptions, the Commissioner receives funding from a number of sources, of the majority being through the Home Office funding and council tax precepts. Income assumptions are currently being reviewed as part of the process, and we anticipate that the police funding settlement will be received in mid-December. With regard to the council tax precept, there remains an amount of flexibility to the level of precept set. As previously stated, the current assumptions in the MTFS is a 2.99% increase, which equates to £8.60 on a Band D property. The Commissioner will soon be asking residents about the precept as part of the consultation process in order to balance the needs of the policing for the additional funding against the ability of Staffordshire residents to afford the policing precept. Should the government allow the same flexibility as in 25-26 of £14 per annum for a Band property, this would equate to an increase of 4.87% and would reduce the current gap within the report by £2 million for 26-27. So in summary, Chair, the overall financial position is on track for the current financial year. There are clearly some financial difficulties in the coming year due to funding uncertainty and constraints as highlighted in the report. Hopefully I've highlighted some of the key areas within the report and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Commissioner, would you like to come back in?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Sarah. I'm reasonably pleased with this. So we're forecasting a underspend of £750,000 at the moment by the end of the year. And we're getting nice early clarity on what is likely to move the picture. I think, colleagues, you'll find the table 4.2 to be the most useful bit of the report. Perhaps I shouldn't suggest that to you, but I certainly do. I'm always very interested to see what's moved. I think notable this line at the bottom there. So the 4.2% pay award. So officers, PCSOs, staff have received another very good above inflation pay award there. The government has supported that with 1.8 million in this year, but there's no future cover from government. This is exactly what I raised with you when I set my precept last year, Chair, that ever more local council tax is being used to fill budget gaps generated by nationally negotiated pay. No local control of that. Now I'm very happy for the service to be paid in line with the excellent work they do, but I'm not particularly happy that those increases aren't met through national contribution. Inflation has caused us to nudge up some of our assumptions into future years, which is prudent. We've always stayed on the right side of that. There are some force areas that continually sort of under forecast those and are reporting shocks. When they're not shocks, they should know better. So I think this is a very sensible approach. Good to see already £4.8 million of savings for next year have been identified. I'm working through those now in a transformation board that we have every 2 months just to understand the nature of the savings, and really very pleased that mostly, I think in the order of 85% of the savings for this year of 8.1 million have already been identified as well, as per those detailed to you in the pack 6 months ago. So a good tight picture. The other thing I would like just to draw your attention to, the neighbourhood policing guarantee, it's referenced early on in 1.6. So this was the big government community safety pledge at the election. 13,000 not officers, I believe 3,000 officers, 3,000 officers or 4,000 to be taken from other roles, which is a strange one. Potentially 3,000 or 4,000 more PCSOs and 3,000 specials. So not the same commitment as the 20,000 officers that were guaranteed and delivered in the previous by the previous government. Really pleased that we've had 53 new police officers in on as a result of that in the first year. Bit staggered that we're 18 months in and we don't know what's coming next year. We don't know whether it's officers, PCSOs or what, and we don't have any clarity yet on the funding for that. So impossible to plan. Very unlikely we'll be able to land those, recruit them and train them next year. As you know, Staffordshire is well provided for in terms of PCSOs. We have a high number per population, but not well provided for in terms of officers. We still need some growth there. And in recent years, we've seen the demand for officers, particularly to manage protests, to be directed at very short notice, which is not an option with PCSOs. The nature of the business is we need more officers in Staffordshire. So I'm continuing, as are the service, to try and convince government not to tell local chief constables what the mix of their workforce should be, but to just give them the money to do the right thing for their places. I'm going to keep an eye on that because I fear that that promise of funding for the growth is not going to be forthcoming, but we'll see. I'm very, very happy to take any questions, and thanks again, Sarah, for going through the detail there.
Thank you. Councillor Heeson.
Yeah, I think you've probably partly answered this. At 4.8, it states savings on employment costs will be made from civilian and PCSO roles. And I can see at 4.12 that the government's maintaining its commitment to the growth of more PCSOs, which appears to contradict the statement at 4.8, so I'm a bit confused about that. But obviously, I'm also concerned that it will impact on the community policing role that PCSOs provide, and just wondering what reassurances you can give us, and when will the update be received from the PCSO consultation?
Thank you, Councillor Neeson. There's been some public interest in our or the services review of PCSO, primarily the shifts, the hours they work, and to some degree the nature of what they're doing. There is a consultation, Chair, currently underway with the staff affected by the review, and that doesn't conclude to the end of November. But I think I can talk in principle about what's going on without jeopardising that. In the paper I mentioned earlier, the MTFS proposals that I shared with the panel just after Christmas, £1 million was written into the savings forecast for this year around PCSO review. I don't think we're going to achieve that. The service is looking to possibly achieve £700,000 of that saving. They've already looked at the original proposals and determined that there is a saving to be made of around 700,000. And that's what's referenced to here. The good news, first of all, there is not going to be a reduction in the number of PCSOs. There is not going to be a reduction in the number of hours those PCSOs work. There will be, if the consultation progresses as suggested, a focus on when they work, and it'll be for PCSOs to be more available in communities when they add most value. The only real change is that they are unlikely to be asked to work from 9 till 10 o'clock in the evening. This is not optimum time for PCSOs. Actually, the demand drops off reasonably quickly at that point of the evening, and the workload, the nature of the work, tends to shift towards that which is better responded to by police officers. So nighttime economy, drunken behaviour, violence, maybe that type of stuff. So the service intention is to move PCSOs to be more visible, more available during those times of the day and early evening when they add most value. The other good news is that to replace actually a plethora of contracts in the order of 20, 30 contracts and different contracts for full-time and part-time, which have been in place for some years, there's going to be a much more straightforward contract, and that will allow us to bring in new PCSOs, and again, for them to have maximum impact if they arrive, should they arrive as part of the neighbourhood guarantee, which I think you and the public will agree is the right way to go, so that people know what they're doing. There's some change, you may have heard, to the nature of the work. In some cases, they might be asked to take statements, for example, only for certain types of crime, and only after training and all the rest of it. But an example I've been given, which is a good one, a big focus on, and in my plan too, around retail theft, shoplifting. If a PCSO can go to a store and very quickly take a statement, rather than the store owner waiting for an officer to become available, then why wouldn't they, in terms of reassurance and the opportunity to pursue the investigation? So those are the nature of the change, and I think they're all, whilst I believe they're good news, the caveat is, unfortunately, nearly every PCSO will be losing some income. There is an uplifted income for that 9 to 10 o'clock particularly, because it's an antisocial hour and their contract allows for additional pay in that period. I really regret that. I wish that was not necessary. However, I would need some persuading that the public would support them working then if they could be more effective at other hours of the day. So I am comfortable with the proposal. I was given it at a high level when the MTFS was set, and I will watch very carefully and will get the feedback from the PCSOs. Every single one of them is being offered an opportunity to have a individual consultation. And I'll just take the opportunity, if I may, to thank them. They are a tremendous asset to Staffordshire Police. Working alongside officers as a team, they bring real skills and abilities, particularly into communicating, not just with young people, but with vulnerable people. Quite often they'll hold the ring around people with long-term addictions, vulnerabilities, etc. In Staffordshire, we've got a good number, about 160 at the moment, PCSOs. I'd like to maintain that. There are no redundancies in our savings plans at the moment. No redundancies. But there is a change of hours, there is a change of expectation, and unfortunately for the majority of them, they will lose some income. But these are tough times. Hope that helps, Chair.
Deputy Commissioner.
Thank you. Sorry, just to sort of add on to that, just in terms of the reassurance piece, I think it's important to also recognise the recruitment in neighbourhood officers that has already been alluded to through the neighbourhood policing guarantee. That does equate across Staffordshire to 2,000 extra neighbourhood hours per week of officer support for those communities. So it is important that we maintain that coverage, and I think that's just an important thing to remember, that between the hours of 9 and 10, it's not like everyone's disappearing. Actually, we are getting extra resource in terms of neighbourhoods, and it's important that's deployed as we would require it to. Through the Chief Constable, of course.
Thank you very much for the responses there. Councillor Heasom, are you content with the response? Thank you. I just, for my own mind on that, you mentioned with PCSOs. Can I just be sure that obviously with the new working arrangements that will be formatted, there may be some obviously discontent from PCSOs that may result in them leaving their position by their choice. There's nothing we can do in that respect other than ensure that there's a working environment. They don't want to be making that decision. But if there was a decision there, can I be clear that that position will be replaced rather than not replaced?
Yes, Chair. The baseline for us at the moment, which we've proposed to government, is I think 160 PCSOs. Now, I will tease this out a little further with the Acting Chief Constable on Thursday. Just to remind you, you and members are very welcome to come and observe the public performance meeting in this room on Thursday afternoon. There's a whopping pack of performance information as well. I know you like the detail. That's there to pore over in advance. But yes, that 160 baseline is something we are seeking to maintain and build upon. And in fact, at the moment, I believe we've got 12 or 15 PCSOs newly recruited going through training. This is a bit of a frustration, actually, but the way government are measuring their neighbourhood policing guarantee, they're not counting when officers are ill, on maternity leave, not available for duty, or seconded to other tasks. So actually we're operating at higher than that 160 for PCSOs in order to maintain their measurable baseline. And yes, if we get offered the chance to recruit new PCSOs and pay for them, They will be on top, but they will come into the organisation knowing the expectation and the duties that they're being asked to undertake. And the shifts will move. They will, in general, move earlier and a slightly different mix shift. But by the way, Councillor, could I just say, I've had a lot of messages, particularly from councillors, because I know you are all quite close to your PCSOs. It's almost your primary way of getting local info and feeding back. That's not going to be compromised either. That relationship's important because you are often telling us something on behalf of a number of people, not just your own views, and the PCSOs can filter that back into their local police teams.
Thanks for that, and you make a very valid point. They most definitely are our interaction with our responsibilities within our communities. Councillor Screen.
Thank you, Chair. Deputy Commissioner, you mentioned that the hours are going to be covered by the neighbourhoods. Who's going to be covering them? That you saying that response officers are going to be doing that work now between 9 and 10, that you mentioned the extra 2,000 hours?
Yeah, Councillor Screen, this is the thing that Dave and I have been most eager to seek reassurance on, and we're still actually awaiting the complete detail. Those extra officers are in the teams, in the local policing teams. They free up, whilst they're dedicated to neighbourhood tasks, which still carry on through the night, and they will be available during those shifts, they also free up the response officers as well. Like you, we want absolute assurance that there is appropriate cover between 9 and 10 o'clock. And again, I'll make sure that's drawn out on Thursday. It isn't a plan to reduce cover during 9 and 10. This is a plan to increase the cover where PCSOs can provide the best support earlier in the day, and to maintain or improve further that cover from 9 till 10. That's what these extra officers are all about.
Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Councillor Fordham, I'm sorry, I'll come back to Chris. Welcome, Councillor Fordham, representing Stafford Borough, to your meeting. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if I may ask the Commissioner how he envisages or proposes the changes announced last week and forecast for implementation in May 28 affecting the approach taken to budget setting as that date approaches. I ask that because it appears to me that that's going to present something of a challenge, and that it will probably require some early consideration. I don't suppose he has that kind of information at hand now, but am I right in thinking that's going to be a key issue?
Yes, you're right, and welcome, Councillor. It's your first meeting, isn't it? Yes. Yeah, nice to see you. No doubt you're already aware there's some confusion about what will happen with local authority budgets as the local government reorganisation progresses. Our expectation is that at some point, when a decision is made, there are then restrictions made on how those authorities might use their funding. The last thing government want would be for authorities sitting on reserves to suddenly spend them on pet projects rather than pass them into the future pot. I would expect, with a 2.5-year run-in, that at some point government might look to commissioners and ask them, I hope not to pause projects, because my fear is, as I mentioned earlier, if we're going through 2 transitions, we could be in a period of projects being paused for 3 or 4 years. And when I talk about projects, I'm particularly thinking about capital investment. We've got some significant work we have to do in the next few years, not least around some upgrades to our custody suites. And in the case of fire and rescue, some opportunities around training and modernising the estate. I wouldn't want those to be put on hold to suit this government, I'll call it transition. I've got other words in mind, but I'll call it transition. So you're quite right. There may come a point when actually the service is not necessarily achieving best value or moving as quickly as it might because of the need for change. I think the difference there is there's not going to be a loss to the Staffordshire purse, if you like, of progressing with sensible decisions. There is a risk around LGR that some councils will behave inappropriately. So slightly different but similar. And of course we are all aware, the public less so, about this opportunity for the strategic mayor step to include a relationship, perhaps a coming together with Shropshire. That's been mooted locally and nationally. That's already on my mind and has been for several months, because there are estate opportunities and challenges around coexisting with other forces, maybe two fire and rescue services sharing assets, infrastructure as well. So I'd expect government just to be keeping an eye on what we're doing, but I've no doubt that we can make a good business case and argument for anything that we put forward. My hope is that whatever follows on from me can deliver on those projects. I don't want to put stuff in place and then the shutters come down in May 2028 and we sit around for 2 years waiting for something to happen. Because those I know are going to be very, very busy times for you as local government councillors with all the change that is taking place.
Thank you. Councillor Fordham, do you want to come back on that?
I'd just like to say, Chair, that I think the issues raised by the Commissioner are clearly very important and require an early clarity, so there can be some careful planning of that transitional period. I hope that takes place. But thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner.
Chair, not to prolong that, but my absolute ask of government is that we move as fast as we possibly can now towards the devolution to a mayor. Moving my role into a mayor with a deputy, I won't lose any sleep. It's that sort of transition point to there that worries me, because that will be expensive, it will bring in delays, it will bring in confusion, and it will bring in a lack of accountability. So the sooner we can get to this strategic mayor point and start planning, the better. I've got millions of pounds worth of investments waiting on that. So the sooner the better.
Thank you, Commissioner. I probably share those sentiments that it is quite that transition period is going to be the critical juncture in the whole thing. Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. What in the timetable, December, there's the public consultation on the precept. What will that feel like to members of the public? And particularly, how do you feed into that process resource reallocation where perhaps some of the public priorities aren't being met? So I'm thinking the non-emergency numbers. So does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Elliott, thank you very much. In fact, if you look at page, I've got page numbers on here, which is a pity. 2.2, there's a timetable there of how we work through the budget process. December's when I normally do my consultation. We had a good number of responses last year. That goes out to the public, stakeholders, everybody. I'll set out the position, make some suggestions, and then we hear back. What I'm really looking somewhat anxiously at is people's appetite to support council tax increases when they're not necessarily seeing them go directly into investments in our local services. If it's to backfill nationally negotiated pay increases and inflation shortfalls, I'm anxious that they recognise that still has an impact on the service they might receive. So normally we get, I think, in the order of 2,500-3,000 responses to that, and that informs my decisions. And Mr. Elliott, Chair, panel, there's something I think I'm keeping my eye on just ahead of the budget. Is that November the 26th, this much pre-announced and reversed and then announced again budget? There's some hints been given that there might be some news about local government and council tax flexibilities almost on the same day. I don't know whether you've picked up the same. Now, whether that means they'll be suggesting that some places can go beyond the council tax limits that they've already set, whether they'll lift the limits. Mayors don't have limits set on them like commissioners do at the moment. Authorities in Wales can set ludicrously high council tax increases. I suspect partly to fill the tax, partly to fill the spending shortfall, they might release some of the preset limits on councils and commissioners. But we should know about that within about 10 days.
Thank you. Any other indications to question? I just have one, which is an assumption. In a sense, a questioning your assumption in terms of the position on 4.5 that assumes the precept increase would be 2.99%. Obviously, we will go through the detail in February. Are we confident that that assumption isn't going to change? I do realise that's a very difficult question on the basis that we're in a world that changes rapidly with monetary terms and so forth. But in terms of what we're seeing here in our MTFS, you're pretty confident that will be met or even reduced maybe.
The level of precept I recommend to the public will be as a result of consultation. I won't prejudge that. I think 2.99 is appropriate. That's the number that government have given us the nudge to include. That would cover inflation in the best of all possible worlds. I don't think actually 3%, I don't think it's going to be that low. I'm not really in the business of not helping the service to meet inflation costs. So I think that's a sensible assumption. It's the £15, £14 I set last year was higher than that. I think it was just over 5%. So it'd be interesting if just ahead of the budget we get clarity on what can be set, what the difference is. And what the percentage value is.
Thank you, Commissioner. So I'm not seeing anybody else indicating on that. So thank you very much, Commissioner, Deputy Commissioner, and I have to say, Sarah, thank you very much for that presentation. So if we can then move on to agenda item 7, which is the MTFS fire update. Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair. I was tempted there to say I'm going to ask for some support from an older hand, but that's not right. What I mean is an experienced hand in this seat, as you know. David, if it's okay with you, Chair, would you mind if David just took us through the detail and we'll have a knockabout afterwards?
More than happy for David. We've been here for quite a few years, and so David, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner, and good morning, everybody. So the update for fire broadly follows the same format as you've heard for police. So we'll be looking at the forecast for the current year 25/6 based upon the reported position for the end of September of this year, so the end of Q2. And we'll also consider the impact of changing assumptions as we look ahead into the medium term and the budget setting process at the moment. So as a reminder for the panel, so the MTFS for the 5-year period 25/6 to 29/30 was approved by the Staffordshire Commissioner following presentation to the panel on the 10th of February this year. And that included a budget increase of a council tax increase of £5 or 5.76%, which was in line with the referendum limit that was set. As a reminder for the panel, the authority actually did lose £1.2 million worth of grant funding for 25/6 as part of the last settlement. Hence the absolute need to increase the council tax at the time for this year by the full amount. If I could just like to reflect on the process so far for this year. So the comprehensive spending review was announced in the spring of this year, which set out broadly the revenue funding allocations for each government department for the next 3-year period, so for 26/7 to 28/29. Now, the Fair Funding Review consultation was then followed and was published in June 2025 and included plans for multi-year settlements, grant simplification and process changes to, and proposes changes to the settlement funding assessment, and modelling suggests that the government grant for standalone fire rescue authorities will reduce by over 4% over the next 3 years. So this equates to a loss broadly of over £100 million worth of funding over that period, which would be equivalent to 1,500 full-time firefighter posts during that time. So quite a stark position that was set out within that consultation. Now, just to give you a bit of background as well, the Fair Funding Review actually refreshes the methodology for distributing what is a fixed pot of funding between local authorities. And it's done so by using a relative needs formula. Now, whilst relative need formulas are being fully reviewed, the data actually underpinning the fire and rescue relative needs has just been simply updated and is now using more up-to-date data. So what does that mean for the Staffordshire Commission of Fire and Rescue Authority? It actually means, and this is some modelling that's been done by the National Fire Chiefs Council, and also we've had some independent modelling done by LG Futures. So what that means for this authority is broadly a reduction in settlement funding of around about £3.5 million over the next 3 years. So in terms of this update, I'll come back to the settlement shortly, but in terms of this particular paper and the update, as Sarah picked up, we look at the budget planning pathway, and that's included on page 3 of the report. But I'd just like to talk for a moment, if I can, about the financial position for the current year 25/6. So the total revenue spend that we saw at the end of quarter 2 was £26.2 million, and the good news is, broadly, the headline revenue position remains on track for the year. Now, this is despite a forecast overspend on pay that we're seeing for the year, which is estimated around about £400,000 or 1.3% of the budget. Now, the pay overspend that we're seeing at the moment is being driven by a significant increase in the operational demand that's been experienced during the first 6 months of the year. And the total number of operational incidents that have been attended by the service were up 22% on the previous year. Operational activity for September and moving into October has moved back to more normal levels. And just to give you an idea, secondary fires reduced in September down to 133 from 414 in the previous month. And this, of course, as the weather conditions became increasingly more unsettled, following what was a very warm and dry summer period. So the year-end pay forecast has been updated and reflects this reducing trend as we move forward into the second half of the year. The forecast level of income and lower capital finance costs, in addition to delivery of the required savings, has ensured that the overall position remains on track, fully mitigating the overspend that I've talked about that we've seen so far on pay, which of course is good news. In terms of this update, the original assumptions that were contained within the approved MTFS have also been subject to scrutiny and been reviewed. And whilst many of the assumptions have remained unchanged as we move forward, the assumption for pay has been increased by 1% to 3% for next year. And this then reduces back to 2% as we look forward into subsequent years. I think overall there will be significant pressure on pay. We talked about police levels of pay, but certainly there will be significant pressure on fire pay as we move into the settlement and the negotiations for next year. So if I'd like to just review everybody to the table that's contained within paragraph 4.14 on page 7, and that just takes us through the 3-year position for 26-7 to 28-29, and looks at some of the pressures that we're seeing at the moment in terms of the potential additional pay award for next year. It also reflects upon the additional activity that we've seen, so we're assuming that there will still be some additional activity as we move forward into next year. We know the weather conditions are changing, so we're assuming that there will be some continuation of that. But we've also got some savings that are coming through from capital financing and the business transformation work that has been ongoing. But I think the important point on this table really just reflects upon the fair funding review, and you can see on the fair funding review the actual impact, or the £3.5 million worth of income that potentially is being modelled to be lost over the MTFS period. Of course, the Commissioner will continue to use earmark reserves effectively in order to support the financial position into the medium term, and that will be as reflected within the reserve strategy. However, the panel should note that earmark reserves have reduced, and the level of earmark reserves at the end of last year stood at £6.8 million. And of course, that reduction has been because we've been using reserves in line with the strategy, but of course to support the capital financing position and reducing our future borrowing costs. The Commissioner, of course, will consider any additional preset flexibility as we move forward. But I think it's important to note for the panel that the fair funding review assumes that the Commissioner will increase the council tax by the full amount of £5 for the next 3-year period in order to mitigate that £3.5 million worth of settlement funding reduction that we talked about earlier. So the current assumption for 26-7 is an increase in the council tax of that full £5, which is equivalent to around about 5 pence per week. For information, the capital programme is included within Appendix 2 and is accompanied by a narrative on page 9. The capital plans across Staffordshire Fire have now been refreshed as part of the budget process work, and of course we have a strong and robust capital framework that underpins all of our capital spend. So in summary, Chair, I'm pleased to report that overall the position for the current year is on track, but I think there is clearly some significant financial challenges ahead due to the continued high level of financial certainty facing the service, and of course the impact of the fair funding review. So I'm happy, Chair, to take any questions.
Thank you, David. Commissioner?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, David. Very, very helpful. As David set out there, this is a bit of an uncomfortable look ahead for us. Again, Q2, pretty much where we thought it would be. A reflection in the pay costs, not just due to increased demand, but also due to something the panel have asked us before. Councillor Atkins in particular was concerned whether we were implementing the riding in threes for on-call firefighters. It was essentially a saving, driven by savings. No, it wasn't. In fact, we spent more money again, and will do into the future, on on-call firefighters, because more of them are out doing what they signed up to do more regularly as a result of being able to get out in a 3 when they wouldn't have been able to get out in a 4. And that means more of them are on site supporting other teams, etc. But the hotter weather has had an impact on firefighting as well, on secondary fires in particular. Also, just draw your attention, if I may, panel, 4.21. This is something you might, I don't believe we've discussed this before. This emergency services network, this is a project that's been underway for several years, if not a decade now. This is a switch from one means of sort of the old style radio connection into digital stuff. billions of pounds have been spent on this so far, and it still isn't ready. Some help from Motorola in the last year, I believe, in the fact that they'd overcharged and there's some money clawed back nationally. But this is the next big difficulty coming forward, which is affecting police and fire and rescue. We have reserves. I know some places have spent them. We've got sensible reserves, but we have no idea at the moment what new equipment is going to cost, what new tech is going to cost to have a resilient network. And as you know, this stuff changes every year. You've only got to have your experience of your own phone contract to recognise that. Unfair funding, I call it, Chair. I mean, it's not just all of the staff. It's not just Staffordshire Fire and Rescue. It's most mixed rural-urban fire and rescue services are being damaged by this. The shift from fire and rescue back into MHCLG away from the Home Office hasn't helped, because that ring-fence budget they had is now moving with the local authority funding. Very strong representations have been made that it shouldn't be, that local authorities should seek to maintain the fire funding. And one of the worries, of course, in recent years of the traditional method of fire authorities is that councils tend to take fire funding to backfill other pressure areas. That hasn't been happening here for a while, but essentially it feels like if you're north of Watford, the fairer funding formula is the opposite for you. I know most authorities in the north, and I don't believe any council in Staffordshire is better off as a result of the fairer funding, and that includes Stoke. It's a shame our representative from Stoke isn't here again, Chair, because he might have been able to confirm that Stoke does not count as benefiting in terms of deprivation or other challenges as far as this government is concerned, which I think I'm struggling to understand if this is really a fairer funding formula. David has clearly set out there that, and I missed this really in the previous conversation, these settlements that we've had for 3 years or are likely to get are welcome. 12-month settlements are a nuisance. Nobody can plan for them. But when they include maxing out on council tax, I think it's disingenuous. And the phrase used is spending power. The authority has more spending power. Yeah, assuming you max out on council tax. And that, in our case, is another over 5% increase in council tax, purely to fund shortfall in national funding and inflation and pay increases. This, I'm afraid, is the trend. It's the train we're on for the next few years. It's really, really disappointing. And it's not honest to tell people there's extra money when there isn't extra money, unless they put their hands in their local home household budget as well. So, hopefully we won't see national income tax increase, but you will see around the country asks for council tax just to maintain service levels as they are. I know the National Fire Chiefs Council and others have made really quite strong representations to government about preserving this funding, because climate change is real. The impact on secondary fires, flooding and so on is real. Massive opportunity for fire and rescue to do more, particularly in reform, working with NHS. Very, very difficult to get this conversation past the silo of the health services. Had a good thumbs up from the Fire Minister on that, the previous one, but couldn't get through the door with Wes Streeting's team, I'm afraid. Straightforward, honest offers of expertise from people who are used to responding didn't seem to float their boat as much as anything with the word AI in it. But we'll see where we get to with that, because I'm going to keep, as is the Fire Chief, putting pressure on to demonstrate what we've done around supporting the health service in Staffordshire. So a bit more context there, folks, but just to summarise, we're in a decent place 6 months in. We're where we thought we would be. Unfortunately, the next 3 years are looking tight. And if we don't meet that, it will mean service reductions, either stations or firefighter losses. So we're at the point now where this is real. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, David. I think that last comment is concerning for sure, and I think it tells a story in itself in terms of the funding that we have and the reliance to fill the gaps. I've got Councillor Atkins.
Thank you, Chair. I want to pick up on David's point about the pay overspend in the first 6 months of the year. I mean, clearly that's down to climatic issues, fires, flooding presumably as well. And so that's up by 22%. What is the service doing to ensure that that doesn't happen in the following year? Because we're likely to have even more climatic events which will put up hours and therefore create a pay overspend. That's the first question. The second question relates to paragraph 4.15, which talks about the council tax, if the council tax is rises restricted to 1.99, the gap over the next 3 years will be 3.88 million. What sort of implications would that have for service reductions?
Thanks, Councillor. Unfortunately, as I've outlined, it'll either mean that we need, or the service needs to consider if it can maintain its full complement of stations and on-call stations, which ultimately means numbers of firefighters, on-call firefighters being reduced, or we look at shifts, we look at 24-hour cover, or we look at numbers which will affect principally whole-time firefighters. There's no way you can find £4 million from anywhere else. It's as tight as a drum, this service is. In the last 3 years, we've really made lots of progress in it being as lean as possible. So the reality is, as presented, an inflation increase won't meet the shortfall. And that's as a direct result of a reduction in the funding proposed for this year and future years, and of the loss of a grant principally last year. That's the reality. I covered off the overspend. Some of it was, the principal amount was definitely demand. Some of that will be recovered by the end of the year is our anticipation, but also the more positive side of that, in some more teams having the opportunity to build their experience and respond as a result of the riding in threes. And I'll be talking to David and the Fire Chief about how we factor that into the future budgeting for pay, because it feels now like that's a solid understanding of the positive impact that that's had.
Just to come back on that, I mean, clearly one of the issues is how can we stop the increase in demand on the service? And one of the issues which I know have been discussed certainly within the moorlands, where of course we've encountered fires, is the banning of disposable barbecues, for instance, because that does tend to lead to irresponsible behaviour in the summer in particular. But are there any other areas where the force is looking at ensuring that we can keep demand, unacceptable demand down because of incidents which are avoidable?
All sorts of those, and actually marketing them, communicating them, raising public awareness around prevention is really key. You only need 1 or 2 wet summers and people forget that their activity can be dangerous. I would support banning of those barbecues, especially in open spaces like the moorlands. I think slightly less direct, but one for the future, is if authorities, planning authorities like the moorlands, could be more robust in encouraging developers bringing forward plans for battery electric sites, solar panel farms, to engage with the fire and rescue service when they're designing their developments as well. At the moment, there is not enough attention given by the planning authorities to the guidance of the Fire Chiefs Council that people bringing forward those developments should seek advice from the Fire and Rescue Service. Getting on and off those sites if they need to deal with an incident is really important. They can deal with the incident, they can deal with it quickly or they can deal with it less quickly, depending on how it is designed. And this is something I'm concerned about increasingly, that planning authorities don't see this as quite as important as their residents and businesses do. I'm not calling out the moorlands in particular because you're not the only one. There are other authorities that aren't paying enough attention to the good advice that's being offered by the Fire and Rescue Service to the developers knocking down their door to put projects on green and brownfield sites. Chair, with your permission, I think Dave wants to come in.
Thank you. I think it's also, we often talk about community safety partnerships more on the policing and crime prevention ASB side of things, but actually the fire service are on community safety partnerships. And I think, of course, in the moorlands where you've got a lot of heathland and dry summer, disposable barbecues is eminently sensible. Those challenges will be slightly different in every council area, I guess, in terms of what they come up with. And I think there is quite a strong role, Chair, for community safety partnerships and looking at what are those preventative measures where we've got bespoke issues in particular areas like the moorlands, like Cannock Chase, for example, and what they can do. I think it's really worth that collaboration between the two, that impactful partnership can actually make a real difference on some of those issues.
Chair, while we're still on this, I know it really comes into the next section, but it follows through. But the closure of the community sprinkler project, I mean, I would have thought, you know, I may be very out of date, but I thought that was an important prevention measure. Why are we having the closure of that? I mean, I'm assuming that was around retrofitting particular buildings. And so I'd be, given it falls very, very well within this conversation, if you could explain why we're seeing a closure of that particular project.
My understanding is it's reached a natural position because most of the buildings where the service had concerns have either done the adaptions. There's not that many high-rise buildings in Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent, and most of them have responded really well to that push. New buildings, it's generally built into the design going forward. It doesn't mean they will stop talking to landlords and building owners about the safety of their buildings, anything but that. But the special focus on it is no longer deemed necessary. Just if I may, and a more positive comment about the moorlands in particular, we've had some terrible losses of life in large areas of water. Couple in the moorlands, couple in the city in recent years. So the council's work with the Fire and Rescue Service on making people aware of the dangers of open water swimming and all the rest of it is really, really appreciated. And I noted this last few weeks only, there's almost been a national thank you from Fire and Rescue because a lot of farmers and other businesses have turned out to support the efforts around the flooding in the last few days, which is pretty horrific actually on the Welsh borders and so on. And up in the moorlands again, the farmers are there, they're providing water sources, they want service to know where water's available, what they can do to help with bowsers and all the rest of it, and it's greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor Atkins. Councillor Screen.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, just come back to the MTFS. I think we'd appreciate a full transparent breakdown of both savings and spending by area and function across all financial reports from your office and the Chief Constable. This level of detail is essential for the panel and the public to understand our resources, protect frontline services and staff welfare. Could you please ensure this information is published before the next precept is set, so decisions are informed and demonstrate true transparency to Staffordshire residents?
Chair, yeah, through you. Absolutely, Councillor Screen. This information goes on the panel's websites. I'll discuss it again in the public performance meetings with the two chiefs. As I've mentioned to you before, I think we're about as open as transparent, not just with operational material information, but financial here in Staffordshire as anywhere else in the county. And if any panel member wants more information, I'm very happy to share it. But actually, you're getting close to the detail that I feel is necessary to work my governance through anyway.
No.
Yeah, it's just that granular detail, I think, that I'd like to see, the full granular detail.
If you've got an example of the type of granular detail that's missing, I'm sure I can provide it to you.
Okay, well, if I'll speak to you then at a later date and go through that, yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions before I indulge myself with one? I was interested, obviously, seeing the comment made on that Motorola charges, and obviously a credit of 51.34%. Where do I see the actual figure in monetary terms? Because obviously, you know, 51% of what? You know, 51% of a pound is less than 50p. But it was obviously be interesting if that information was to hand.
It will. I can't remember the exact number. David, do you remember the number nationally? And we got a chunk of it, didn't we?
So in terms of there's two parts to this. So we received essentially a credit at the end of last year that was around about £500,000, and then at the moment we're just waiting to see how the invoices are coming through this year, because they're always quite behind in terms of timing. So we're just waiting for those to come through so we can see and we can ascertain exactly what credits are coming through this year. But I think it's important to recognise that there will be significant costs for the authority as we move to the new emergency services network. So we need to make sure that if there is some monies coming through, we are actually building up a reserve so that we can actually afford the costs of moving over onto the new network, which I believe is around about 26, 27 when the fire authority will be moving over onto the new network. So we're just waiting to see exactly what that means in terms of the current year position. But I say the important thing is to make sure we're prepared for the future, and we are incorporating that into a emergency services network reserve.
Chair, the fine that Motorola paid was quite considerable nationally. It was, if we got £500,000 and we're one of 40-odd services, it was a big chunk of cash. But the amounts involved in this stuff are astronomical. I think it's over 7 billion in terms of the project. And it's yet to deliver. We've had a number of false starts. I'm particularly interested in the operational practicalities. You can't have not spots like we do with our mobile phones for emergency services. You can't have areas where you can't get through on 999 or speak to an emergency response vehicle. So there are real practical implications of this. It's a big national piece of work. I'm involved, as you know, with the National Police Aviation Service. We bought some new helicopters recently with the support of Home Office, only to find out that we need now to spend another few million quid accommodating the new ESN network. Otherwise, the police won't be able to talk to the helicopters. So there are all sorts. It's not funny, really. It's not funny at all, because it's a massive amount of money, but it's an example of something we've got to keep our eyes on, because it'll have an impact on all of us.
Thank you for that. Obviously, it always like to know what the actual figure is, but I'm reassured in terms of how that money will be received into the part that it goes into, obviously, reserves into terms of the transition with modernisation and so forth. So I think it's an important use of how that funding that you receive will be used. Members, so could we acknowledge the update on the MTFS for the fire? Members are content. Thank you very much. Plenty of nods, so I appreciate that. Agenda item 8 is the fire safety plan. This is an item that was deferred at our last meeting. So if I may ask the Commissioner to introduce the report. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. We did defer this. This is the update basically on how the Fire and Rescue Service is delivering against my local fire and rescue plan. Chairman, with your permission, because I think this would work well for us, quite a bit of the content of this is better presented, I think, in the Statement of Assurance from the Fire and Rescue Service, which is our next item. This document, if anybody hasn't had a chance to read through it, is really a tremendous summary of what our terrific service do for us day in, day out. Very approachable. The item I would like to note, however, in the fire and rescue plan is the level of detail that it goes into around the HMI inspection and the areas for further improvement that are set out in there and the timetable to deal with those. But beyond that, most of it is covered in the Statement of Assurance, because a lot of my plan for fire and rescue is operational. I guess the difference is, and it's quite significant, there aren't many of the public saying they want fire and rescue to do X, Y, Z and not forget about that, in the same way as they are on police and crime. Most people have a very clear expectation of what fire and rescue do, and it's what they do. So it's reporting on the operational performance. We had a update from the lead inspector, Andy Cook, the other day, his National State of Fire report. Very pleased that Staffordshire were mentioned a couple of times in there. One of them was for the pace and attention they'd paid to addressing AFIs in their HMI report. And I think you can see for yourself, there's several pages there early on in the document just saying here's where we could do better, and a full report as to where we were on them. Now, because this paper was prepared some months ago now, a number of those AFIs have moved again. I've lost the piece of paper I had reminding me which one, but I expected a question around why is this red, why is this amber? Actually, the majority of those are no longer red, they're amber, and some of the ambers are already green. So I'm comfortable with the progress there, and hopefully you're assured at my level of oversight on the on HMI. So on the Statement of Assurance, this Chair, sorry, is that okay with you if I just pull the two together?
I think I'm going to ask that question to members. I think it makes eminent sense, to be quite honest, but I'm getting lots of nods, so, yep, we will roll it in. So thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Lots of nods. So I'll just jump quickly through a few highlights, and then I'm sure you've got some questions about this. Page 14. It is absolutely a people organisation, as we know. Just some reassurance there around the various investments we've made. New breathing apparatus. Full rollout is pretty much concluded now. You can see that in the middle of the page. New cleaning material and electric response vehicles. We've got a number of hybrid and electric vehicles being trialled. Unlikely that will move to full appliances. Full appliances, particularly when they're on site, pumping water, generating power, all the rest of it when they're there. I don't think the service is envisaging electric vehicles are going to fill that space anytime soon. But certainly the lighter vehicles, response teams, prevention teams, can lead to savings and a contribution to the environmental highlights. Just over the page 15, 16 new full-time firefighters, we welcome them. And we've got a transfer of 4 from on-call staff, which is good news, and 11 new on-call firefighters. That's great news. In fact, it's always a struggle with on-call, but more are joining and more are staying as a result of some of the changes of the last few years. But you can see in here plenty of detail on what the service is doing. I'll just have a quick nod on page 19, if I may, to that sort of Blue Peter chart there. 50 years of Staffordshire Fire and Rescue was celebrated with that ambition to get some money for charity. They made 54,000, so well done to everybody who engaged in that. And that wider sort of community reach of fire and rescue still remains an important part of the service. So just on our communities then, that's starting at page 21. You can see references to various vulnerabilities. This is key, I think, to reminding ourselves, and it's where I have frustration with the fairer funding. Risk is not as simple as the number of properties, the number of people. It's far more related to vulnerabilities, age. Can people exit buildings quickly? Do they have addictions? Are they likely to be less able to save themselves, protect their environment? And if you're in old-style Victorian terrace properties, they are inherently less safe than the buildings we're producing now. I really do hope MHCLG are reconsidering that funding for fire around risk and not just around population numbers. Regrettably, the people who lose their lives in fires tend to be vulnerable in the ways outlined in the middle of the page there: mobility, mental health, substance misuse, and even housing problems. So the wider work there, more and more contribution to safe and well visits. They are more targeted than ever, so not just knocking everybody's door, but looking to use health information and other data to be going and speaking to the people that are most at risk. Just switching to page 26, our environment, you can see again the contribution there, electric and hybrid vehicles. We are putting in some EV investment. I didn't know we got 2 beehives at Stafford Fire and Rescue. I need to go and see that. If there's honey available, I think the panel should have first dibs. But we'll come back to that one. Clean concept on page 27. This is very important. Unfortunately, it's now becoming clear that some firefighters have become ill or even lost their lives due to contaminants that get basically affixed to their equipment when they're tackling fires in certain environments. The Fire Brigades Union and others have been working with the fire chiefs to understand how we're going to manage this. It essentially comes down to providing facilities for firefighters to clean themselves down, remove their equipment before they get back into the vehicles, or even changing the design of vehicles, the design of spaces when they arrive back at the stations to maximise the cleansing of these contaminants. Actually getting back into the vehicle if you're still covered is not a good environment. This is a big piece of work for the next 10 years, and it will involve investment. It will involve quite considerable investment in equipment and estate. At the moment, there is no capital funding stream for fire and rescue nationally. I think there needs to be for this. It's in the interests of our firefighters. Just on the activity there, page 28, just towards the top, 24-25 highlights, 511 fire safety audits, 767 building regulation consultations, 645 licensing consultations, and the all-important post-fire inspections. That's where you learn the lessons. And hopefully, Councillor Atkins, that just gives you some comfort there around that prevention activity. It's non-stop around what can be done to make spaces as safe as possible, and with your support around things like the barbecues on open land, that would be really a way forward. But again, planning authorities, planning expectation, what we are expecting in terms of fire and rescue, expectation around Grenfell is going to be more and more significant. There's reference to fire hydrants, which I covered before. A nice summary on page 31 of the fire and rescue report. Just to remind you folks, we've got HMI in for police probably mid-spring next year. HMI for fire we're expecting at the end of spring. I've got more than my fingers crossed that we will see the services demonstrate further improvement. But it's hard work getting there, particularly with fire and rescue, because that's a good report. Not easy to improve on that. Page 32 has got a nice picture of me. I must have been on holiday just before that one. And then just a really good summary on page 34 of the overall numbers. And we can see there that secondary fires at 9.5%. Road traffic collisions actually down 11% for fire and rescue service, but Dave's not there for performance on Thursday, are you? But I'll be picking up on road traffic collisions with the Chief Constable, because regrettably the numbers have really snuck up during the summer, and we've lost a few more lives again than we had hoped on our roads. But that continues to be a demand for fire and rescue, and thank goodness they're there to help. Page 35, really, really good summary there of the headlines for the service. So, Chair, I don't really want to go into any more detail than that, except to pull out those highlights. Very happy to take questions on the statement of assurance. Remind the public that that is there for them to see and hopefully be assured by as well, and how it ties in with my plan in the following paper as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. So, as agreed, we obviously have taken the two reports together. So, I think questions can come as you wish for the Commissioner to take on board. So, anybody wishing to raise a question? Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if it's touched on in the assurance statement, but I'm just picking upon Charlotte's point about consultation for BESS systems, battery energy storage systems. Yeah. So I remember when we went to Stone, I think the Chief Fire Officer sort of intimated that if the fire service was a statutory consultee, that would create considerable resource issues. So you sort of mentioned there's nothing to stop the local planning authority from consulting the fire and rescue service, but how should that work in your view without creating, you know, too much of a burden for the fire service, but also keeping the public safe?
Appreciate the question. This is probably the most, I think for councillors, particularly in rural areas where they're seeing a huge number of these applications, way more than the country needs, by the way. It's twice the number of applications that is needed to meet the storage requirements. It's certainly the biggest thing in my mailbox in the last 18 months. At the moment, the Fire and Rescue Service will provide advice. It will actually sit down with the developer and say, we're looking for access and egress from the sites, and here's how you might lay out the site so that our appliances can get on and off and around. They're confident that they can deal with issues that arise. There is some concern around communities. They see reference to fires in the past, particularly in the States, on on sites that are really not like those being designed and approved in the UK. There's more worry than there needs to be around the risk. However, that risk is further reduced if the Fire and Rescue Service can get on and off quickly and easily, have access to the resources they need, water and power and so on. My own view is that they should be statutory consultees, and government should fund that, because it is not the amount of work that would go into a statutory response is quite different from one advising a developer. It's more than a steer, it's something they've got to stick by, and there would be staff training implications. So I think government should grasp this nettle. There's a huge amount of money going into the ambitions around net zero. The reality is, to power this country on renewables will take twice the grid and twice the amount of energy generation as we've currently got, because of the times when it's not available due to wind drop or low sun levels. Twice the grid, twice the number of energy generation. That is a huge amount of money that's got to be invested to achieve the same outcome. I think some of that money should go to making it as absolutely safe as possible and to reassure the public that these developments are safe. That would be my preferred way forward. The fire chiefs are understandably a bit nervous because they don't want to say, yes, we'll do that without the funding. Hopefully that covers that off.
I think there is a concern with what you've said there in terms of reassuring public that there is safe involvement, and I'm aware that also it's not just about using water to use, it's special fluid, I understand, and it's ensuring then that the applications are available at all outlets to ensure that if anything was to occur, that the fire service is well and truly equipped to deal with what's presented in front of them.
Absolutely, Chair, and in fact part of the design and the advice would be to manage runoff. So on this site, if we were to need to chuck the service would need to chuck a lot of water on it, where would the water run off to? Is there implications of that? There's a wider point as well, and I know the fire chiefs have written off to the government only in the last fortnight to suggest that they have a share of development monies as well. We've got houses being built all over the county at the moment. Fire and rescue are not the beneficiaries. I mean, it's a measly amount that finds its way back to capital to design and protect those sites in terms of S106 and SIL. It's derisory. Similarly, police and fire, police don't get any recourse from developer funding. It needs to go into highways, it needs to go into education, but it could really do with going into those other public services as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any more questions? Councillor Atkins.
To say that I was a mystery shopper because I had a safe and well visit, mainly because my smoke alarms were emitting horrible noises, and they were far too high for me to. I live in a Victorian house, far too high for me to get to. So Ben arrived. He got two, another Ben, and he fitted 2 new smoke alarms, a carbon monoxide alarm, and a heat sensor as well. So I think he thought all these Christmases had come together at once, because I got the full lot, and he was very professional, very good, and yeah, he was excellent. Just very professional and got on with the job and did a great job.
Typical Ben.
I should have said, I thought I was a mystery shopper, but actually he recognised my name, so maybe not quite so much.
Commissioner.
I'm pleased to hear that, and this won't apply to you, Councillor Atkins, but the teams that go in, they're always on the lookout as well for other vulnerabilities. They'll deal with, and they refer on to other services. It really is an important part, but that engagement matters as well, doesn't it? It's reassuring. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, Councillor Atkins, you raise a very, very important, that help is there. If only members of the public realise that if they need help in those applications, the service will help. So very important to know. So members, can we just roll in then 8 and 9? Are we content with the reports? Thank you. So moving on to item 10. And the complaints procedures. I'm going to invite Kate Loader to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The report before the panel today is set out from page 119 to 126. The recommendations of the report are that panel consider the report and provides guidance on the current process and the level of panel's involvement in the complaints process. The options are remain the same, involvement of the Chair and Vice Chair, or establishing a complaints subcommittee. The report sets out why this issue is under consideration. If I may, I'll run through briefly the options. Remain the same. At the moment, the complaints process, which I have to say is infrequently activated given the infrequent nature of the complaints against the Police Fire Crime Commissioner, sits and is delegated by this panel completely to the monitoring officer. The monitoring officer then reports back to this panel on an annual basis. B, involvement of the Chair and Vice Chair. That brings, as is self-explanatory, the Chair and Vice Chair. If panel elect this option or option C, then a further report will be brought back to panel for consideration about how the Chair and Vice Chair or the establishing of a complaints subcommittee could take place. C, the establishing of a complaints subcommittee would be much more akin to an arrangement that most local authority, most councillors will be aware of in terms of the subcommittee that sits usually under your audit and standards panel. So those are the matters for discussion and for guidance for today from panel members. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. I think before we go into, my view is that in terms of receiving complaints, I think it's important for us as panel members to take ownership as well here, and in terms of whether it be B, C, I would be content as your chair to remain the same. I will remain nervous about that because I think that doesn't allow the panel to actually protect, and I use the word protect, our officers. I think it's important that as established panel members and so that we actually hold a level of degree of responsibility. So that is my view on it. I think it's important, so I'm happy whether it would be B or C, but not A. That's where I would take it, but I'm open to debate. We're in a democracy, so members, do you have an opinion on that can guide the panel and how we take it forward? I'm not seeing anybody wanting to contribute on this, so Councillor Screen.
My agenda thing.
Agenda item 10. Is that our problem that we're...
Councillor Atkins.
It's in recommendations at the beginning of the report. And I agree with you, Chair, that I don't think we should remain the same. And as Vice Chair, I'd be very happy to be involved. But obviously it's up to the panel to decide what they would like to do. I think the reason for a little intervention is we have so few complaints that it's not seen as being, you know, of major concern. But we need to have the process there in view of the complaint that might arise. Because when that complaint arises, that's 100% an issue for the complainant.
Thank you, Councillor Atkins. I agree. Anybody else who was... Have you, Councillor Screen, you've...
Can I just have a couple of seconds to read this, Chair, if you don't mind?
Sorry, Councillor, you're not Councillor. Mr. Elliott.
I've been promoting, I've enjoyed that. I'm happy with option B, Chair. Involvement of the Chair and Vice Chair. I'm proposing that, yeah.
Commissioner. Councillor Merrick. So that's one proposal that's gone, we will put forward. Councillor Screen.
Yeah, me personally, I'd go for item C.
And do we have a seconder to proposal C, which is the establishment of complaints subcommittee as proposed by Councillor Screen? Do we have a seconder? No seconder? So the recommendation as proposed by Mr. Elliott and seconded by Councillor Vince Merrick, that we go with the option B, which is the involvement of the Chair and the Vice Chair. Those in favour, please indicate by showing of hands. And those against, and one against. That doesn't mean there's no abstentions. There's no abstentions. So on that note, option B. So we'll take that forward, please, Kate.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, panel. The next step will be to develop a proposal for panel to approve involvement, setting out the involvement of the Chair and Vice Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that concludes item 10. I know that the Commissioner has just stepped out of the room, so may I just move to question item agenda 12, the work programme, please. We'll go back to item agenda 11 when the Commissioner comes back in. So 12, the work programme. Any items for discussion on our work programme? Yeah. Councillor Atkins?
Just to ensure that the issue of stalking and related issues are brought back onto the work programme as soon as possible. Because I do think that is a live issue. So I think that, you know, I don't want it to sort of be, you know, floating in the ether for months and months. I think it is something which is of concern, particularly to women, not wholly to women, but women and girls. But I do think it's an issue that we should be looking at. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on the work programme? I'll just obviously give you an update with regards to the working group. It was mentioned that there wasn't a written note on the role of the secretary or the support officer. Could you, I'm going to ask the panel if they would like one, and possibly also including members' role and chairs, etc., and which could come to the next meeting with the complaints process. So that is the in terms of the question there, in terms of the roles of the secretary and support officer, and indeed, again, the panel and even the role of the chair. Any comments to be made in terms of that process?
Yeah, I think we understand, I certainly do, the roles of everybody. It was just the secretary's role, which isn't stipulated. It's within so many regulations, I think it's not put down as one. So I think it's just understanding the role of Kate's role there, as opposed to Mandy's and yours and everybody else's. I think we're fully aware of those. But it's just to make it clear about what, in this particular case, Kate's role as B setting out.
Thank you. I'm quite content that we go through that process, so we'll work on that for sure, and that will give clarity and transparency into the process. Any other items for discussion? We've obviously got Councillor the stalking.
No, I really was talking about the working group and whether, I mean, we only got through about a third of Councillor Screen's paper. I just wondered if we have another date for the working group and whether that will also be online, because obviously we need to make progress. And you've identified a couple of items that came out of that discussion. But as I said, we have 2/3 of the paper still to do. And I think on the progress we're making, that would probably be a meeting which should last a couple of hours, something like that.
Very, very good point, Vice Chair. So we're progressing and looking for a new date. Anything you can add to that, Mandy?
No, Chair, not at the moment, but we are progressing with the date, and I will let you know as soon as possible.
To say that last time we only met for an hour, maybe we should schedule in for 2 hours, because on the basis of the progress that we made in 1 hour, then I think that probably 2 hours would be required to get through the rest of the paper on the basis of the progress we made last time.
I do concur that if we make our next one for 2 hours, and I hopefully bring that to then a conclusion on that, we can't keep going on and on. Councillor Screen, did you indicate? So that's the work programme. I now flip back, now the Commissioner has joined us again. Can we go to item 11, which is questions from panel members to the Commissioner, probably more surrounding your own as representatives of your boroughs and districts. You might have something that you would specifically like to raise. So are there any questions from panel members? Councillor Screen.
Thanks, Chair. Excuse me. Commissioner, we ask that you detail the specific actions you implemented to support the wellbeing and morale of officers and staff during uncertainty about the PFCC officers' future. How are you working with the Chief Constable and Chief Fire Officer to maintain operational effectiveness during these changes? Will you commit to publishing staff feedback on these changes before any decision are finalised so their voices can be heard? You may not have actually considered that at this stage because it is early doors, but it's something you may be considering.
Excuse me, Councillor Strain, you're asking implications for officers and staff of the announcement last week? Yes, yeah. I mean, we've had, as you know, we were notified, I think, on, was it Thursday morning? had only half an hour to talk to my own team about that. There's been a holding statement go out to the two services. I know there's some concern from Fire and Rescue about what they've been, the suggestions that have been made and communicated to council leaders and others, which they're pursuing. I don't believe the police chiefs or the fire chiefs have yet been directly engaged in a conversation with either department, which is a bit of a surprise given the nature of the announcement. As far as I'm concerned, and I hope the two chiefs will appreciate this, I've had some good conversations with both of them about it. It's business as usual for us for the next couple of years. But I have had a couple of communications from staff, which I appreciate actually, mostly saying this seems a bit odd. How is what's being proposed going to be better? But I will be communicating more as and when we know it, and I'm very interested to hear if any of you as panel members pick up on officer or staff concern about a vacuum in governance or anything of that nature. Please do let me know, because I'll address it. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one from me. It's actually something I raised at July. It's not directly your responsibility, Commissioner, but I would always like a view of what you consider it is with regarding these outlets that have popped up in all our communities on the selling of counterfeit vapes, etc. And there has been very much a move, and I congratulate the work that the police, trading standards and local authority environmental health have recently have taken a strong view on it and has made those appropriate raids. I think the public perception remains that you can close one down but one will reopen. What is your view that obviously in terms of moving forward, that once we've seen them come to a closure and dealt with appropriately, that we are dealing with the problem? Just really taking a side view, because I know it's a big concern within Lichfield District across the main of Lichfield and Burnswood.
Yeah, I noticed no concern. I picked up on a release only last week, I think. There's been a national focus on this. It's actually taken some involvement from national bodies as well, because there's organised crime behind some of the activities. And we're talking about stores, almost pop-ups, counterfeit goods, in some cases money laundering, etc. And I do appreciate that real partnership effort, the county trading standards working with the police and others, local authorities as well, seeking to address this. What I wouldn't want to do, however, is to suggest to everybody that might go and shop in these stores or have their hair cut or whatever, that every one of them's crooked, because they aren't. You know, some of them are just people trying to make a living as best they can. But where there's suspicions and concerns, they are being taken very seriously, actually quite often with covert type surveillance. So it isn't necessarily the case in these circumstances. You've got a uniformed officer stood outside the store. You wouldn't even know that somebody is watching those types of operation. But I'll try and dig that release out and share it back through Mandy, because no doubt colleagues will be interested. There's some good numbers there.
Thank you, Commissioner. That would be very kind of you if you could feed that through Mandy. I certainly appreciate that. Members, any other questions that you may have? So yes, sorry, Mr. Elliott.
It's not so much a question, it's just that I live in Staffordshire Moorlands, like Councillor Atkins, and I'm only one of 100,000 there, but every PCSO or fire officer I've had to deal with, as a member of the public, has been brilliant, without fail. So sometimes it's good to just feed that back And there's a lot of things that we're here to scrutinise and complain about, but I've never really had a problem, so I just wanted to share that.
I think that's a very worth comment. Sometimes with all our scrutiny, we sometimes don't pick out the positive and express the positive. So I think that is very kind words, and I think it's a true reflection of there is always good in everybody, and I think that's how we should look at things. I will be here on Thursday to attend the your meeting there. But can I take this opportunity to thank you, Commissioner, Deputy, Louise, David, and Sarah's first meeting in full. Thank you very much. Commissioner, did you want to just say?
Just a very quick one. I wanted, if I may, from our side, just to thank Adrian for his years of intelligent, articulate, and sometimes very difficult to answer questions, and wish him the very best in whatever comes next. This is your last one, Adrian. Yeah, unless they drag. Well, thank you, sir. Your scrutiny has been appreciated.
Thank you, Commissioner. I was privy, but we're waiting for Adrian's official announcement, and no doubt that I will make something more public at another meeting, but we'll see how we go. But Adrian is noted. On the no exclusion of the public, as there's no items in confidential, I formally close the meeting at, I'm going to say 12:15, and thank you all very much for your attendance, and goodbye.